we also have in studio a live guest, and that is Patrick Elliott, FFRF's legal director. And welcome back to Freethought Radio.
Yeah, glad to be back in person with you. This has been a long time since I've been on the radio show back in person.
That's right. Well, you're a Twin Cities guy now.
Yeah, I've no longer a cheesehead, and I'm across the border in Minnesota now.
Well, we're glad to have you back.
At the end of the year, beginning of the new year, we have a lot to talk about the previous year in legal activities, don't we?
Yeah, it's a good time to reflect on, what we've been working on, what we've anticipating going forward. And I can say I don't know if it was a record year, but it's probably one of the busiest years of our legal work at FFRF, at least since I've been here.
Because didn't we file, I think it's 11 lawsuits?
I think we have, this is very, not exactly precise based on memory. We may have 11 ongoing lawsuits right now. And I think we filed 7 lawsuits in 2025. And so that's probably close to a record for FFRF. And it's, a lot of people involved in doing that, our legal staff and outside attorneys, but 7 new cases over the last year.
So I wonder if we should first talk about all the 10 Commandments litigation that is going on and what has compelled that.
Yeah, I think, I hope a lot of our listeners are aware of what's happened, over the last year or 2 years. Several states, adopted laws to mandate the 10 Commandments be posted in public school classrooms, in every classroom, if a display is donated. And so that's in Louisiana, which we sued over, Texas, which we'll probably talk about, and Arkansas. And so those are the 3 states that had actually passed. These laws were proposed in more than 20 states. And not just the 10 Commandments, but a specific version of the 10 Commandments that's very, a Protestant version. And
Patrick, doesn't it also say it has to be a certain font size and it has to be viewable and readable from anywhere in the classroom?
Right. Each state has dealt with that differently, but it has to be pretty large and prominent so that students, when they're sitting in their normal classrooms there to get instruction, are going to be able to see and read the 10 Commandments posted in their classroom.
So, doesn't seem to have any kind of secular purpose, does it?
Right. And, and this no longer the exact test that the Supreme Court has said that we would use. But because this is a public school classroom, this is obviously very coercive on kids. And the Supreme Court in 1980 ruled that this exact thing was unconstitutional when Kentucky passed a similar law. And I think the court said, if there's any purpose to this, it's that students will read and meditate upon and venerate, the 10 Commandments. I think that's what's going on in these different states. It's the same thing that happened in Kentucky. It's just happening, in 2025 and now going into 2026.
I just wanted to put a little advertisement that lawsuit, Stone versus Graham, was taken by one of FFRF's members, William Cameron Stone. Although it was not named for him, there just happened to be a woman plaintiff with the same last name, not related to him, but and he's still alive, and we owe him a lot.
And that case has, been very helpful for a lot of the work we've been doing for the last several decades. States weren't trying to do this, schools weren't trying to do this. We're in a new time period where this is something, that precedent is something that the other side, for whatever reason, is gunning for. They're really trying to take out that decision, Stone versus Graham, and want a world where we're going to post religious statements in our public schools for all students to see.
So who's behind this? Did these states just sort of coincidentally, independently decide we're going to start putting up 10 Commandments monuments?
Right. That's very doubtful. This legislation was being proposed in multiple different states. We don't know necessarily who drafted the exact legislation that they're proposing. There are some groups that FFRF often does, is on the opposite side of, one of those being First Liberty Institute, one of those being the Association of Christian Lawmakers. There are groups that think this is a great thing because they believe in the 10 Commandments, but also it's a legal strategy, that they're really trying to get courts to say that this type of thing is okay.
Was this like Project Blitz?
Right. They're no longer using that terminology. This bills in state legislatures to advance Christian nationalism, they've now gone away, maybe because FFRF has called that out.
Yeah.
But it's of the same similar groups proposing to do this type of thing, like Project Blitz.
So we are working with a number of coalitions and also a pro bono law firm in all 3 states, and also represent a great diversity of plaintiffs, don't we? Can you talk about some of those people that we're representing?
Right. And again, I think you're right to call out. We're working with the ACLU, we're working with Americans United, we're working with the law firm Simpson Thatcher in cases in all three of these states. But really the plaintiffs they're not all FFRF members. They're not all of non-religious people. We have some ministers. We have people who are Jewish, Unitarian Universalists.
A rabbi, don't we?
A rabbi, yes. So there are a lot of people oppose this, not just because they're necessarily opposed to the Ten Commandments. They don't want their public schools being involved in something that's personal to them, that's a part of maybe their belief system, but they don't want the school interfering with that. They think religious instruction, like I think we all do, is something that individuals decide, and they do that at home. They do that in their churches or their synagogue. It's not something to have, the public schools as the machinery to do it. And so there are a lot of people with us on this.
And including district court rulings in all three states issuing preliminary injunctions, at least in the districts that we have named. But tell us about the class action suit in Texas that was what's filed last month.
Right. So this was just filed in December. We had filed in Louisiana, as you mentioned, and received a preliminary injunction, so blocking really the problem. And same in Arkansas, and amending and adding a couple other school districts and blocking the law. In Texas, we filed 2 lawsuits in Texas and blocked it against all of those school districts that were named. But other school districts continued to put it up. We continued, and the other groups that are involved in this, were continuing to get contacted by families. There are almost 5.5 million public school students in Texas. There are over 1,000 school districts. And so this problem wasn't just a few school districts that we were suing. I don't know the total districts we've sued there. There's probably over 30 school districts that have been challenged in our cases. And now in December, we've taken, a class action to really bring all of the districts in on behalf of all of the students there to finally stop this, because they shouldn't have to face this, while the case is pending, especially. These displays should come down while we wait for, a final court ruling.
And briefly, can you mention what the Attorney General in Texas has been up to?
Yeah, and this is in part because of the activities of the Ken Paxton, the Attorney General in Texas, has said, this is Texas law, it's mandatory, and had actually affirmatively filed suits against a few school districts because they had not put up the Ten Commandments. And so really, school districts were under threat in part from action from the Attorney General to violate the U.S. Constitution. And so, we felt the need to make sure we're protecting the rights of students and families there.
And also, the Supreme Court has recently indicated that it might like class action suits.
Yeah, I mean, that's a more complicated issue, not even in the specific realm we work in,
right.
The Establishment Clause or the First Amendment, but there is a decision from, this past term of the Supreme Court deciding, what types of cases can be brought, and they don't really like, nationwide injunctions or statewide injunctions. And so really it seems like the way to proceed is, people against individual school systems or government entities, or class actions are one potential way to address those violations, outside of the nationwide injunctions.
So what that means is we're now representing we're now asking to represent every school district to make sure that every school district does not have 10 commandments, right?
Right, and there are and I'm not a class action expert myself, but there are class representatives to do that. So we brought an actual case with a number of individuals named, and they are representative of other families in similar position, like families from all the other school districts in Texas.
So I know there's a few more things to talk about, but coming up on January 20th is very important oral arguments before the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And I think that involves 2 of our states that we're suing. And what's at stake and what's going on?
Right. So that's both the Louisiana case has been taken up by the full 5th Circuit Court of Appeals. We had already won before a 3-judge panel. The 5th Circuit decided to vacate that decision, to set that aside and hear it in full. And they also are taking up the first Texas case that we brought. And so both of those cases will be argued on January 20th. And I don't know the exact total of there may be 17 judges that will hear the appeal, but the full court is going to decide this issue.
But it's not a good sign that they agreed to take it up as en banc, is it?
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we would prefer to have our win stand with 3 judges, but it doesn't really foretell how the court's thinking. You know, there are individual judges deciding to take it, and they may decide in our favor easily.
Anyway,
There might be enough judges who want to take it, but they're not a majority who would rule against us. We are hoping.
Right. It's kind of like when the Supreme Court takes a case, you don't necessarily know why or the rationale for taking it. There may be reasons that they want to take it. So, you know, we're hopeful. I think we're right on the law. We have U.S. Supreme Court precedent on our side. And so I do think, you know, it's something we're going to be taking seriously, but I do think that we will prevail in that case.
Can you remind me what's happened with the preliminary injunctions while we wait for the en banc, the full circuit to hear this?
So those are all still in force. All of the injunctions against the particular school districts we have sued are in force. Texas being the unique district where we have now sought, you know, really an injunction against, as a class, against all the other districts that aren't involved in the prior cases. And so the good news is for the families we represent, the 10 Commandments are not up in their school districts. They may be up in some districts that aren't currently, where there's not an injunction in place, but all of our districts are still enjoined.
So there are other lawsuits, but I wondered if we should pivot to, I don't know, it was a memo from the federal attorney general, Pam Bondi, that came down at the end of the year that is very concerning about the rights of people like us who are free thinkers, who are not religious, who might criticize religion. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and you know, some people might wonder why this has to do with our work, but I think we'll get there. So Pam Bondi issued a directive to all federal law enforcement agencies and to the Department of Justice about domestic terrorist groups. And that seems like a normal thing. However, within that, it was very clear that the Department of Justice and that Bondi is really targeting, you know, contrarian belief systems. And so she had, in the memo, is really directing these agencies to, as a factor, to look at, I think, anti-Christianity is supposedly one of the motivations for these domestic terrorist individuals or groups. And then I think opposition to, and I don't know the exact language because I don't have
family values,
traditional family morals and values.
Right.
And so really this is a directive from, you know, the highest law enforcement, the Department of Justice official, really painting with a brush that would bring in, you know, atheist groups, Muslim groups, you know, anybody who's not in the view of, you know, kind of the traditional Christian nationalism. And so this memo, you know, calls for agencies to start to review their files, calls for like tip line rewards for reporting domestic terrorist groups. There's
money,
really
cash money for turning somebody in. It's kind of like the 1950s.
Right. And so I think FFRF, it was appropriate for us to call this out too. So, you know, we're not the slowly boiled frog. I think this is a warning sign of what the Department of Justice is looking at. And they seem to be thinking that, you know, atheists or non-Christian groups are somehow involved in, you know, violence or domestic terrorism. That's obviously not the case, but I think that they're trying to paint a narrative that, you know, really a political narrative connecting that violence to, you know, groups that don't have traditional belief systems like the Christianity. And I think that's really a problem, and I'm glad that we're calling it out. I know that there are prominent national law firms also calling it out and saying, hey, this is not normal. This is not something that we've seen from the Department of Justice before. And so I do think as a legal matter, it's a red flag. There's a sign here that is there going to be targeting of groups like FFRF or groups that just don't fit the, you know, the normal mold of the Christian organizations that the Department of Justice might like.
So lots to worry about. We have about 30 seconds left here. Besides litigation, the legal team has been sending out letters. How many letters did they send out this
I think
year?
almost 600. We were in the neighborhood of 600 letters to deal with real violations in local communities. A lot of times it's school districts. And so
About half of them usually,
right. So it's a big part of the work we do that's not, you know, a big flashy lawsuit, but is getting the job done in local communities.
And with some victories.
Yeah,
without
we're
going
probably
to
just
court.
totaling them up, but we usually have 150 or 200 victories a year from the legal complaint letters.
Right.
So-
And I don't know the final total this year, but it's in the hundreds.
And we'll be reporting that in our newspaper, Freethought Today. And Dan, what's coming up?
Well, thank you, Patrick, for being
thank
with
you.
us. It's a good report.